Hi, Eli. We're going to continue with Mr. Badger chapter, okay? We're going to start where we left off. There, sit down. Sit down, said the rat pleasantly, and go on with your porridge. Where have your youngsters come from? Lost your way in the snow, I suppose? Yes, please, sir, said the elder of the two hedgehogs respectively. Me and little Billy here, we are trying to find our way to school. Mother would have us go, was the weather ever so, and of course we lost ourselves, sir, and Billy, he got frightened and took and cried, being young and faint-hearted. And at last we happened up against Mr. Badger's back door, and made so bold as to knock, sir, for Mr. Badger, he's a kind-hearted gentleman, as everyone knows. I understand, said the rat, cutting himself some rashers from the side of the bacon, while the mole dropped some eggs into the saucepan. And what's the weather like outside? You needn't sir me quite so much, he added. Oh, terrible bad, sir, terrible deep the snow is, said the hedgehog. No getting out for the likes of you, gentlemen, today. Where's Mr. Badger? Inquired the mole as he warmed the coffee pot before the fire. The master's gone into his study, sir, replied the hedgehog, and he said how he is going to be particular busy this morning, and on no account was he to be disturbed. This explanation, of course, was thoroughly understood by everyone present. The fact is, as already set forth, when you live a life of intense activity for 6 months in a year, and of a comparative or actual somnolence for the other 6, during the latter period you cannot be continually pleading sleepiness when there are people about or things to be done. The excuses gets monotonous. The animals well know that the badger, having eaten a hearty breakfast, had retired to his study and settled himself in the armchair with his legs up in another, and a red cotton handkerchief over his face, and was being busy in the usual way of this time of year. See, there he is. The front doorbell clanged loudly, and the rat, who was very greasy with buttered toast, sent Billy, the smaller hedgehog, to see who might be. There was a sound of much stampering in the hall, and presently Billy returned in front of the otter, who threw himself on the rat with an embrace and a shout of affectionate greeting. Get off, spluttered the rat with his mouth full. Thought I should find you all right, said the otter cheerfully. They were all in a great state of alarm along the riverbank when I arrived this morning. Rat never's been home all night, nor Mole either. Something dreadful must have happened, they said, and the snow had covered up all of your tracks, of course. But I knew that when people were in any fix, they mostly went to Badger, or else Badger got to know of it somehow. So I came straight off here, through the wild wood and the snow. My! It was fine, coming through the snow as the red sun was rising and showing against the black tree trunks. As you went along in the stillness, every now and then, masses of snow slid off the branches suddenly with a flop, making you jump and run for cover. Snow castles and snow caverns had sprung up out of nowhere in the night, and snow bridges, terraces, and ramparts. I could have stayed and played with them for hours. Here and there, great branches had been torn away by the sheer weight of the snow, and robins perched and hopped up in their perky, conceited way, just as if they had done it themselves. A ragged string of wild geese passed overhead, high on the gray sky, and a few rooks whirled over the tree, inspected and flapped off homewards with a disgusted expression. But I met no sensible being to ask the news of. About halfway across I came on a rabbit sitting on a stump, cleaning his silly face with his paws. He was a pretty scared animal when I crept up behind him and placed a heavy forepaw on his shoulder. I had to cuff his head once or twice to get any sense out of it all. At last I managed to extract from him that Mole had been seen in the wild wood last night by one of them. It was a talk of the burrows, he said, how Mole, Mr. Rat's particular friend, was a bad fix, how he had lost his way, and they were up and out hunting, and were chivying him around and round. Then why didn't any of you do something? I asked. You mayn't be blessed with brains, but there are hundreds and hundreds of you, big stout fellows as fat as butter, and your burrows running. Sorry, baby. That's weird having the phone. Okay, where were we? What, us? He merely said. Do something? Us rabbits? So I cuffed him again and left him. There was nothing else to be done. At any rate, I had learnt something. And if I had the luck to meet any of them, I'd have learnt something more. Or they would. Weren't you all, nervous? Asked the mole. Some of yesterday's terror coming back to him at the mention of the wild wood. Nervous? The otter showed a gleaming set of strong white teeth as he laughed. I'd give 'em nerves if any of 'em tried anything on with me. Here, Mole, fry me some slices of ham, like a good little chap you are. I'm frightfully hungry, and I've got any moment to say to Ratty here. Haven't seen him for ages. So the good-natured Mole, having cut up slices of ham, set the hedgehogs to fry it, and returned to his own breakfast, while the otter and the rat had their heads together, eagerly talked river shop, which is long shop, and talk that is endless, running on like babbling river itself. A plate of fried ham had just been cleared and sent back for more when the badger entered, yawning and rubbing his eyes, and greeted them all in his quiet, simple way, with kind inquiries for every one. It must be getting on for luncheon time, he remarked to the otter. Better stop and have it with us. You must be hungry this cold morning. Rather, implied the otter, winking at the mole. The sight of these greedy young hedgehogs stuffing themselves with fried ham makes me feel positively famished. The hedgehogs, who were just beginning to feel hungry again after their porridge and after working so hard at their frying, looked timidly up at Mr. Badger, but were too shy to say anything. Here, you two youngsters, be off to your mother, said the badger kindly. I'll send someone with you to show you the way. You won't want for dinner today, I'll be bound. He gave them 6 pence each, and a pat on the head, and they were off, with much respectful swinging of capes and touching of forelocks. Presently they all sat down to luncheon together. The mole found himself placed next to Mr. Badger, and as the other two were still deep in river gossip, from there nothing to divert them, he took the opportunity to tell Badger how comfortable and homelike it felt to him. Once well underground, he said, you know exactly where you are. Nothing can happen to you, and nothing can get to you. You're entirely your own master, and you don't have to consult anyone or anyone. Mind what they say. Things go on all the same overhead, and you let them and don't bother about them. When you want to go up, there are things waiting for you. The badger simply beamed at him. That's exactly what I say, he replied. There's no security or peace and tranquility except underground. And then, if your ideas get larger and you want to expand, why, a dig and a scrape, and there you are. If you feel your house is a bit too big, you stop up a hole or two, and there you are again. No builders, no tradesmen, no remarks passed on by fellows looking over your wall, and above all, no weather. Look at Rat now. A couple of feet of flood water, and he's got to move into the hired lodgings. Uncomfortable, inconveniently situated, and horribly expensive. Take Toad. I say nothing against Toad Hall. Quite the best house in these parts, as a house. But supposing a fire breaks out, where's Toad? Supposing tiles are blown off, or walls sink or crack, or windows get broken, where's Toad? Supposing the rooms are dotty. I hate a drought myself. Where's Toad? No up and out of doors is good enough to roam about and get one's living in, but underground, to come back to at last, that's my idea of home. The mole assented heartily, and the badger is consequence got very friendly with him. When lunch is over, he said, I'll take you around this little place of mine. I can see you'll appreciate it. You understand what domestic architecture ought to be, you do. After luncheon, accordingly, when the other two had settled themselves into the chimney corner and had started a heated argument on the subject of eels, the badger lighted a lantern and bade the mole to follow him. Crossing the hall, they passed down one of the principal tunnels, and the wavering light of the lantern gave glimpse of either side of the rooms, both large and small, some mere cupboards, others nearly as broad and as posing as Toad's dining hall. A narrow passage at right angles led them into another corridor, and here the same thing was repeated. The mole was staggered at the size, the extent, the ramifications of it all. At the length of the dim passages, the solid vaultings of the crammed store chambers, the masonry everywhere, the pillars, the arches, the pavements. "How on earth, Badger," he said at last, "did you ever find time and strength to do all of this? It's astonishing." "It would be astonishing indeed," said the Badger simply, "if I had done it. But as a matter of fact, I did none of it, only cleaned out the passages and chambers as far as I had need of them. There's lots more of it all around about. I see you don't understand, and I must explain it to you. Well, very long ago, on the spot where the wildwood waves now, before ever it was planted itself and grown up to what it is now, there was a city of people, you know. Here, where we are standing, they lived and walked and talked and slept and carried on their business. Here they stabled their horses and feasted. From here they rode out to fight or drove out to trade. They were a powerful people and rich and great builders. They built to last, for they thought the city would last forever. But what has become of it all?" "Who can tell?" said the Badger. "People come, they stay for a while, they flourish, they build, and they go. It is their way, but we remain. There were badgers here, I have been told, long before the same city ever came to be. And now that the badgers are here again, we are an enduring lot, and we have moved back out for the time. But we wait and are patient, and back we come, and so it will ever be." "Well, and when they went at last, those people?" asked the Mole. "When they went," continued the Badger, "the strong winds, the persistent rains, took the matter in hand patiently, ceaselessly, year after year. Perhaps we Badgers, too, in our own small way, helped a little. Who knows? It was all down, gradually ruin and leveling and disappearance. Then it was all up, gradually as seeds grew to saplings, and the saplings to forest trees, and bramble and fern came creeping in to help. Leaf mound rose, and obliterated streams in their winter freshness brought sand and soil to clog and to cover, and in course of time our home was ready for us again, and we moved in. Up above us, on the surface, the same thing happened. Animals arrived, liked the look of the place, took up the quarters, settled down, spread, and flourished. They didn't bother themselves about the past. They never do. They're too busy. The place was a bit humpy and hillocky, naturally, and full of holes, but that was rather an advantage. And they didn't bother about the future either. The future when, perhaps, the people will move in again, for a time, as may very well be. The wild wood is pretty well populated by now, with all the usual lot, good, bad, and indifferent. I name no names. It takes all sorts to make a world, but I fancy you know something about them yourself by this time." "I do indeed," said the Mole, with a slight shiver. "Well, well," said the Badger, patting him on the shoulder. "It was your first experience of them, you see. They're not so bad, really, and we must all live and let live. But I'll pass the word round tomorrow, and think you'll have no further trouble. Any friend of mine walks where he likes in this country, or I'll know the reason why." When they got back to the kitchen again, they found the rat walking up and down, very restless. The underground atmosphere was oppressing him and getting on his nerves, and he seemed really to be afraid that the river would run away if he wasn't there to look after it. So he had his overcoat on and his pistols thrust into his belt again. "Come along, Mole," he said anxiously as soon as he caught sight of them. "We must get off while it's daylight. Don't want to spend another night in the wild woods again." "It'll be all right, my fine fellow," said the Otter. "I'm coming along with you, and I know every path blindfold. And if there's a head that needs to be punched, You can confidently rely upon me to punch it." "You really needn't fret, Ratty," said the Badger placidly. "My passages run further than you think, and I've bolt holes in the edge of the wood in several directions, though I don't care for everybody to know about them. When you really have to, you shall leave by one of my shortcuts. Meanwhile, make yourself easy and sit down again." The Rat was nevertheless still anxious to be off and attend to his river, so the Badger, taking up his lantern again, led the way along the damp and airless tunnel that wound and dipped, part vaulted, part hewn, through solid rock for a weary distance that seemed to be miles. At last daylight began to show itself confusingly through the tangled growth overhanging the mouth of the passage, and the Badger, bidding them a hasty goodbye, pushed them hurriedly through the opening, made everything look as natural as possible again, with creepers, brushwood, and dead leaves, and retreated. They found themselves standing on the very edge of the wild wood, rocks and brambles and tree roots behind them, confusingly heaped and tangled in front, a great space of quiet fields, hemmed by lines of hedge black on the snow, and far ahead a glint of the familiar old river, while the wintry sun hung red and low on the horizon. The Otter, as knowing all the past, took charge of the party, and they trailed out on a beeline for the distant stile. Pausing there a moment and looking back, they saw the whole mass of the wildwood, dense, menacing, compact, grimly set in vast white surroundings. Simultaneously, they turned and made swiftly for home, for firelight and the familiar things to play on, for the voice sound cheeringly outside their window of the river that they knew and trusted in all of its moods, that never made them afraid with any amazement. As they hurried along, eagerly anticipating the moment when they would be at home again among the things they knew and liked, the Mole saw clearly that he was an animal of tilled field and hedgerow, linked in the plowed furrow, the frequent pasture, the lane of evening lingerings, the cultivated garden plot. For others, the asperries, the stubborn endurance, or the clash of actual conflict that went with nature in the rough. He must be wise, must keep to the pleasant places in which his lines were laid, and which held adventure enough in their way to last for a lifetime. Yay! So we're going to do chapter 5 tomorrow. Love you. Mwah!